Rachel here with Yarn At Play Crochet, and I have another in-depth yarn review for you guys today. Today we are going to be reviewing Caron Latte Cakes, and this is a yarn that was recommended to me in one of the Addy knitting machine groups that I'm on Facebook. They said that it works really nice on the Addy, and so I went out this week and grabbed a cake of it to try it out. And so I figured I would show you guys my thoughts on it. Now, the first thing you might notice about the label, it has this no wool symbol there. So if you have any kind of wool allergy, it's kind of nice that they stick that on there and let you know what the content is right on the front of the label. But let's talk about the specifics of it first. So Latte Cakes is they classify it as a bulky 5. They recommend a 6.5mm needle or a 6.5mm crochet hook. They say that it is machine washable and dryable. It is 58% acrylic and 42% nylon, and it comes in a nice big 250 gram cake that will have 530 yards in it or 485 meters. And the color that you'll be looking at today is called Rose Scented. So that is the basic stats on this yarn. Let's talk about it, because this is a very unique yarn, if you ask me. This is not something that I typically work with. As you can see on my little crochet swatch here, it is an extremely fuzzy yarn. Now, if you are new to Yarn At Play, first of all, welcome. If you've been here a while, you might know that fuzzy yarns generally are not my favorite yarns to work with. I don't have very many of them in my stash at all. I usually stick with yarns that don't have tons and tons of fuzz. But this one is extremely fuzzy. I would call this an eyelash yarn. And it is a ply construction with that eyelash running through it. So it does have, as you can see here on the strand, it is a true cord, a regular ply yarn with those little fluffies coming out of it. Maybe you can see better if I hold up the blue here. You see that? So that is kind of how the yarn is structured. Very fuzzy, very fluffy, lots of little eyelashes coming off of that strand. So let me show you first of all here how this worked up on my knitting machine, just so that I can show you kind of how the color variation goes. So I was actually really pleased with how this worked up on the knitting machine. Everyone said that it worked up great, and they were right. It didn't even feel like there was any stress on the machine at all. Like with most 4-weight yarns, and definitely with 5-weight yarns, you can feel a bit of resistance. You can tell the machine is working harder to get through it. There was none of that with this. Even though they classify this as a 5 bulky, I had zero resistance going through with this on my knitting machine. If anything, it's one of the smoothest yarns I've ever used on the knitting machine. And you'll see here too, it's kind of fun that the color breaks in this pretty much come out to perfect squares on the 46-inch Addy knitting machine. So if I wanted to get a bunch of skeins of this and turn this into a blanket, it would have kind of this pre-programmed, really beautiful, like checkerboard pattern, which I think is really, really fun. But the benefit of it having these really big stripes in it as well is that if you wanted to color control this blanket, so you're working on a crochet project and you wanted all of your things to be exactly lined up with the rows that you wanted, it would be very simple for you to just roll up balls. And the breaks on these, the yarn breaks, are hard breaks. You see exactly where that color change happens. And so you can just roll up little balls of it and color control your project that way. If you wanted to do a project that was entirely big, solid chunks, you could color control the entire skein, ball up all of the blues together in one section, get a decent sized ball of blue, and just work up a project that was smaller in just blue or any of the other colors. So I hope that kind of gives you an understanding of how color control works. Basically, it's you taking the sections of color and ending them at those hard breaks in the yarn skein, so that if you don't want your row, or your color change, excuse me, to happen middle row, you can like make it so that you will end the row and then start a new color. So you don't have those color breaks middle row. Or you can just do all of it together and make one color of yarn. Because with the latte cakes, they only come in these self-striping colors. They don't come in any solid colors. So if you really wanted a solid color, you could color control this and get the yarn colors out of it that you wanted. Now this little ball of yarn here, this is the size of one complete color section of yarn. So that gives you a bit of an idea of how much yarn you get out of a single square here. So this square of yarn equals this ball of yarn, if that makes sense. So if you were wanting to do any color controlling, hopefully that gives you an idea of how that works. Otherwise, like I said, it's fun that it's in these blocks. I'll kind of line it up here so you can see exactly how those squares would line up perfect if you wanted to make a checkerboard blanket out of this on the 46 needle adding knitting machine. That would line up perfect and it would be really, really beautiful. So props to Caron for making those color changes extremely even and consistent and really, really pretty. For crafters who kind of want to dissect the yarn and turn it into something a little bit different, that just kind of gives us a bit of a leg up so that we can really customize the yarn exactly how we want to and kind of make it a little more interesting. You could even just do solid stripes. Like I know that this is folded differently, so this is here and this is here. But if you, like the color breaks are the same sequence. So you could take this just straight out like this. And then if you had two cakes, you could color control it so all of your stripes are in the exact same spot. And you could just have a big horizontal stripe blanket. It would not have to be checkerboard. Anyways, I hope all of that makes sense. I thought that that was kind of cool how they planned out the yarn breaks and the color breaks in this. They're extremely consistent and I think that that's just kind of fun. So you can see lots and lots of fuzz, super soft. I haven't even talked about that yet. This yarn is extremely soft. I'm not even sure if a velvet yarn is softer than this worked up, to be honest. This is just extremely soft. I mean, it's, yeah. I have no words for it. Like I've never felt a yarn that has felt quite like this before. It's extremely, extremely soft. And because of that, it's very silky to work with. So let's talk about working with it in crochet. I've talked enough about that beautiful knit block of yarn there. Let's talk about how it works up crochet. So first of all, I will show you a little bit about how this yarn pulls out. Because it's an extremely fuzzy yarn, you would assume that it would have trouble ripping back. Now I ripped back a bunch of stitches in this earlier because I really wanted to test it out. And I had worked up a pretty good size swatch and I only got snagged up one time. One time. So that kind of goes to show that even though you have the potential to get snags, overall it's not a major issue for ripping back with this. Now this is not a yarn that I would really recommend to somebody who's a newbie crocheter or knitter because you don't have great stitch definition just because it's busy with all of that fuzzy eyelash stuff happening there. Like it's not the simplest to work up just because of like being able to see your stitches, but it's not because it's a pain in the butt to work up feel-wise. If you are someone who has any experience in knitting or crocheting, you've been doing it for a little bit, you're very accustomed to how your stitches should feel and where they should go, I don't anticipate you having any problem with this yarn at all. Now this is the recommended hook size. This is a 6.5 millimeter crochet hook. I think that you could size down if you wanted to. I tend to like my stitches to be a little bit closer together and not quite so gappy or spaced out. So I don't think you would have any problem going down to a size 6mm. And depending on your tension and how you crochet, you might even be able to go down to a 5.5. That's just personal preference. But for me, if I were to work up a big project in this, and not just a swatch with the recommended hook size, I would probably use a 6mm hook. That's just me. I like my stitches a little bit closer together, but that is probably the hook size that I would go to for this. Because you can see the stitches are just a little bit spaced out. They're a little bit gappy. You can see my fingers through there. Like, it's not terrible, and that fuzziness definitely makes it look very full. But for myself, I would probably size down one hook size to a 6mm. But that is entirely just preference. That's not, you have to do that, that's just preference. Okay. Whew, there's so much to talk about with this yarn, you guys. So hang in there with me. I got more stuff. So let's talk about how it works up amigurumi style. Now, if you've ever watched one of my in-depth yarn reviews before, you know that I always swatch it up amigurumi style to see how it looks and how it feels and how it worked up. This worked up really well amigurumi style. My only caveat is, again, if you've never done amigurumi before, you might not want to start with this yarn because it is going to make it a little bit more challenging to see those super tiny tight stitches that you need to work up into for amigurumi. Now, I have not finished this and stuffed it, which my amigurumi swatches I always do for filming, so you might be wondering why I haven't done that. And it's because this side of the fabric looks significantly different than the inside of the fabric, and I wanted to show that to you. So this is what the outside of the fabric looks like. And with amigurumi, you always have the, the right side facing out. You can see it's a little bit fuzzy. Some of those fibers are sticking out there. But when I flip it inside out, it is so much fuzzier. Like, all of those fibers as I was stitching up kind of got pulled to the inside, and it is so much fuzzier on the inside. So say you wanted to use this yarn for like a bunny or a puppy or something that you wanted to have a lot of fuzz on. Honestly, if you're able to work the pattern inside out, I probably would. Now, that would be an extremely difficult proposition, especially when you get to finishing off your circle and needing to decrease stitches and everything else. I'm not entirely sure how that would work, but if you are able to turn your work inside out so you can get all those fuzzy on the outside, I would recommend doing that. But it is still nice and fuzzy and fluffy with the right side facing out. I just was absolutely blown away by the difference when I was working it up. So that's why I didn't finish the ball. I wanted to show you that because I was a little surprised. And you can see in the stitches how those like lighter fibers are tucked into the stitch, which means they're all loose on this side. And I think that's just based on how the stitch works up and how you're pulling the yarn through the loops. The fuzzies are always going to want to be on the wrong side of the work. So, interesting. I'm not sure how much that applies to what you're doing, but I thought that that was interesting. Okay. One last thing on the amigurumi side, my daughter begged me to make me a little chonky cat keychain for her out of this yarn. So I figured I would show that to you so you can kind of see what that looks like and how fuzzy it is. Now, I finished this and she decided she didn't want it anymore. Which I can't really blame her. I mean, this is not going to be everybody's cup of tea, the way that this looks up. Like, this was worked up on my knitting machine, okay? But, so this isn't going to be everybody's cup of tea, but I thought that it was kind of fun. And it definitely has the soft squish factor and the fluffiness and everything else. So I just figured I would show that to you. Fun little chonky cat. So, all right. Now, you guys all probably want to know how this held up in the wash. The tag says machine washable and dryable. Says it right there. Let's take a look and see how it did. So here is my swatch that I ran through a hot wash and a hot dry. And holy cannoli, do you see the fuzz? It's like a carpet. Like it's legitimately, it's like a carpet. Now, and that's not to say that that's a bad thing. Like, that is this yarn. It is that eyelash kind of style of yarn. And again, there are fewer fluffies on the right side of the fabric, and there are more fluffies on the wrong side of the fabric with crochet. Now, with the knit, I haven't noticed any major difference in the amount of fluffiness on either side based on the knit. But in the crochet, because of the way that you're pulling your yarn through the loops, those fuzzies are going to tend to want to be on the wrong side of your fabric rather than the right side of the fabric. Doesn't mean the right side isn't fluffy, it definitely is, but you'll have a few more on the wrong side of your piece. So this is extremely soft. It has not lost any of its softness at all. If anything, I would say it's slightly softer after having been washed. And that doesn't surprise me because of all of that eyelash, fluffy, fuzzy goodness. So I worked this up with a 6.5mm crochet hook, and some of that gapping that I was seeing in here has dissipated a bit because it ran through the wash, and this was a hot wash and a hot dry. I always throw my swatches in on hot with towels and all the other yucky stuff that I have, and then in on a hot dry just to test out the yarn to see how much it can withstand. And this withstood it. Like, it's super fuzzy, it's super fluffy, and all of those tiny little fibers got pulled out when it went through the wash and the dry. But I think that that would happen no matter what you washed this on. I think it's always going to get fuzzier and fluffier after going through a wash and a dry, because those little fibers, if they were tucked into the yarn at all, they're getting agitated, and as they get agitated, they pull out of the yarn, and so it's just going to be fuzzier. And you can see here like the fuzz comparison. So there's pre-wash, and I realize this is knit, okay guys, but there's pre-wash, and that is post-wash. Like, it's so fuzzy. It's just so fuzzy. But I mean, if this is your jam, if you really like this kind of fuzzy looking yarn, you're not going to be disappointed, because this is extremely soft, and it's probably right up your alley and will very likely be your new favorite yarn. There's a lot of pros to be had here. But like I said, this is entirely a personal preference thing. I don't usually go for fuzzy yarns like this, but I will say that even with my eczema, I did not notice this yarn like sticking to my skin or making it feel irritated at all. It's definitely silky soft and really nice to work with. I would work with this again. I don't know how much I'm going to be working with it because of the price of the yarn and the fact that this kind of fuzzy eyelash style yarn just isn't really my style. Look-wise, no matter how soft and fuzzy and cozy and snuggly it is, it's just not really something that I tend to go for because of the look of it. I will say though, I am tempted to make a giant blanket out of this and just wrap myself up in it every single day for the rest of my life. I will say that. But as far as like the overall look of it, it's not my favorite like style of look. But it's so silky, smooth, snuggly soft without having any kind of catching on dry skin or nails or anything like that. It's a great yarn. It costs a fair amount. It's $9.99 per cake, at least at Michael's. They had buy one, get one 50% off. So ultimately that comes out to, if you're buying an even number of quantities, that ultimately comes out to 25% off your yarn. But with this skein, like say I was going to work up a knit blanket in this, I would need at least 6 panels, which means that realistically I would need 6 skeins of yarn. So that would be a pretty expensive blanket. That would be, I mean, if it wasn't on sale, it'd be a $60 blanket for sure. So that's something to keep in mind. I definitely wouldn't buy it personally if it wasn't on sale, but it does. It works up like a dream on my knitting machine. It's soft and squishy. It has all of the cozy, like, I want to live inside this yarn kind of feel. It just depends on whether or not this is your style, whether you like the cake, whether you like the self-striping, whether you like the fuzziness. I mean, that's all personal preference stuff. But as far as a fuzzy yarn goes, I was very pleasantly surprised. So anyways, I have talked enough. This is a really long video and I apologize, but I hope that you tracked with it. I had a lot of fun with this yarn and that's why I'm talking so much about it. Okay. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. Please subscribe to my channel if you have not done that already. Please do a search in the YouTube search for hashtag Share The Yarny Love. Make sure you enter all those giveaways and get yarn to people who need it the most. Thank you, Glenda from Creative Grandma, for partnering with me for this. And I cannot wait to see what happens from here. You guys, I hit 1,000 subscribers today. That is a huge goal. And I'm so excited. And you guys are the reason why that is possible. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. It is just a dream come true for me, truly, to be able to do this kind of stuff for you guys. So thanks for hanging out with me today. Give the video a like, subscribe if you would like to see more video yarny content like this. I promise I won't talk as long as I did today. And we will see you all next time. Bye-bye, guys.